You'll notice at the bottom of that table, it explains that the primary funding source is through the docket fees. On page 5, I will go into the current year budget. There were no changes subsequent to the 2022 session. No adjustments were made to the approved amount of $910,420. The agency estimates a revised fiscal year 2023 expenditure of $974,702 from special revenue funds. This is an increase of $64,282 or 7.1%. You will see the agency is asking for a supplemental request for their central registry. We're requesting $40,000 to increase the capacity and security of their central registry database, which catalogs the training and employment records of 8,300 police officers each year. They also obtained additional 847 square feet of office space because of the additional capacity for the central registry and investigation records, and that would be an increase of $10,800 for rent for that additional space. There's also an increase of salaries and wages of $2,200. That's approximately 5% for employee salaries. And then there was a slight raise provided to 2 of the part-time investigators. And then all other adjustments is a small decrease of $8,000 in the aid to local unit expenditures from the local law enforcement training reimbursement fund. The governor concurs with the agency's request and makes no changes. So the governor does concur with the supplemental request. On page 6, there's a table that will show the changes from the actuals of 22 to the revised estimate for 23. Again, this is an increase of $62,448, 6.8% above the 22 actuals, and this is primarily for the supplemental and the other increases that we just talked about. On page 7, you have fiscal year 2024. We start off in the table with what the 2023 revised estimate is. The agency is asking for an additional enhancement for security and safety at the Wichita facility of $100,000. I do want to note that this agency did request some spark funding for a new building at Wichita. It was about a $2.6 million request, and they did not receive that. So they do want to ask for the $100,000 for this facility, which is in a high crime area in Wichita, and there have been some attempted break-ins at the facility. And again, the governor concurs with the agency's request for that enhancement and makes no changes to the fiscal year 2024 request. The next 2 pages are in essence the supplemental requests that I've already referred to and the enhancement request. Again, the governor does concur with those. And then on the last page is the performance-based budget, and this agency just has administration program. And I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Shirley. Committee, we got any questions for Shirley? Pretty cut and dry. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have the Director of the Kansas Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, which is on WebEx. Doug Schroeder, welcome to committee.
Greetings. Thank you, Chairman and committee members. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you very much. The Kansas Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training is committed to advancing the profession of law enforcement. The Commission adopts and enforces regulations that are necessary to ensure that law enforcement officers are adequately trained and certified, as well as we investigate lapses of integrity and revoke certifications when necessary. The majority, as you heard, the majority of our budget is devoted to salaries and wages of our 6 full-time personnel and 2 part-time The second highest expenditure is that of our lease agreement in our Wichita office, with the third highest expenditure being the upkeep and maintenance to our central registry database. The governor recommended a supplemental change in fiscal year 23 to increase the capacity and security of our central registry database. We're very thankful for that, as this database tracks about 8,300 current law enforcement officers and all 40 hours of continuing education that they get per year. This will help us fulfill that stakeholders' requests. The governor also recommends a supplemental change in fiscal year 24 in the amount of $100,000. This funding will support the upgrade of physical security at our KC Post office in Wichita. An upgraded physical security includes controlled egress and entry points, as well as technology infrastructure and protection of records. Our current performance measures are listed. I believe you have those in front of you, and they include the number of cases that we present to the investigative committee, number of officers certified, the percentage of agency requests completed, and the number of demographic forms processed per year. The post is solely funded by fee funding. It is funded through docket fees of municipal court, is not funded by docket fees in district court, and we have seen those docket fees in municipal court dwindle or decline for the past 6 years. We still believe it is adequate to fund fiscal years 23 and 24. However, should this decline continue, we do expect to need to explore alternative funding sources. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Director. Senator Pittman.
Thank you, and thank you for the testimony. Just a quick question on your physical security. It begs a question, if we're in a high crime area with this office, the office is serving a kind of an administrative function, very important, obviously, for our folks here in Kansas, but have you looked at relocating to a location that's not such a high crime area instead of doing a physical enhancement of $1 million or so to this particular facility?
Yes, I was very hopeful that we might be able to secure ARPA funding for that exact thing. We put in that request. It was of course denied, as it is a competitive process. I understand that. Right now, our reserves are just over 1.3 million. So probably not adequate. Well, definitely not adequate to build a standalone facility, but certainly not adequate to find something else that would fit our nature. And so really, I was just talking with our chairperson yesterday about this, and one way that we'd like to tackle that is by coming back and asking for different funding mechanisms so that we can build up some of those reserves to do just that.
Committee, we have any other questions for the director? Okay, thank you, Director, for your presentations. We'll close this hearing and we'll open up deliberations at this point. I think so. Are we doing it? Yes. Senator Bellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion we approve the governor's rec and look at the pay on a global scale like we have been on all of them. So that's my motion.
Okay. Second? Second, Senator Pittman. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we are ready for the hearing on the Adjutant General's Department. And Merle Riedel's here from the KLRD Budget Analysis. Merle, welcome to committee.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Merle Riedel. I'm a fiscal analyst with Legislative Research. We're going to be looking at the budget request and governor's recommendation for the Adjutant General's Department. You'll see a budget analysis with the name of the agency at the top. Looking on page 1, just a quick review of the agency. The Adjutant General's Department provides for the organization and readiness of the Kansas Air and Army National Guard and implementation of statewide emergency management programs. Kansas National Guard has approximately 7,000 members, which is not the same as FTE, but 7,000 members across the state of Kansas, working in full-time civilian jobs and performing federal military duty during scheduled training weekends and other prolonged periods. I would ask you to move on to page 4. We're going to bypass some of the executive summary and go straight to some of the analysis. On page 4, you'll see a table at the top titled Expenditures and Financing. This table depicts the overall expenditures. I would have you note that under financing, you'll see a large portion for this agency is drawn from federal funds. These are primarily supporting some of those disaster relief payments. Moving on to page 5 for the budget analysis for FY 2023. You'll see under legislative approved, the 2022 legislature approved a budget of $137.4 million, including $31.6 million SGF for the Adjutant General's Department in FY 2023. There was some adjustments related to SGF reappropriations. A total of $3.1 million SGF was added in FY 2023 due to unexpended funds that reappropriated from FY 22. That primarily included $1.6 million for design work associated with the remodeling of the State Defense Building, which was delayed due to protracted bidding process for architectural services. These reappropriated funds also include $1.1 million for disaster relief payments that shifted into FY 23, and $237,000 for deferred maintenance projects that were rescheduled for FY 23. Moving towards the bottom of page 5, under the agency estimate, the agency submits a revised estimate of $154.5 million, including $36.4 million SGF in expenditures for FY 2023. This is an all funds increase of $14 million, including an SGF increase of $1.6 million above the 2023 approved amount. The revised estimate includes 293.6 FTE positions, which is a slight decrease of 0.6 FTE positions below the FY 2023 approved number. So moving down that page, we'll get into some of the specific adjustments. You'll see the first item is the agency's supplemental request. This is the agency's only supplemental request for FY 23. This relates to state disaster payments. The agency requests $17.6 million, including $1.6 million SGF, to reimburse eligible expenditures at state, local, and nonprofit organizations for federally declared disasters. The agency notes that payments for federally declared disasters require a 25% state matching rate. Of that 25%, 10% is provided by the agency. An increase of $1.6 million SGF would leverage an additional $17.6 million in federal payments, primarily for severe weather storms and flooding that occurred in June of 2017. Moving on to page 6, the next adjustment relates to COVID-19 federal relief. The revised estimate includes a decrease of $11.6 million, all from COVID-19 federal relief funds. You can see on some of the tables that the availability of COVID-19 federal relief funds generally decreases from the actual year even to the budget year to really a fairly minimal amount of COVID-19 relief funds. Item 14 is disaster relief payments. So absent the agency's enhancement request, the revised estimate includes an increase of $5.1 million from federal public assistance and hazard mitigation grants to reimburse those local entities for expenditures related to federally declared disasters. Item 6, Federal National Guard Bureau funding. The revised estimate includes an increase of $3 million from Federal National Guard Bureau funds. The increase is primarily attributed to capital improvements for design and the initial construction phase of a Joint Forces headquarters on federal property at Forbes Field in Topeka. So there's 2 years of expenditures for that you'll see, and the agency's budget request includes $8 million in FY 23. And then item number 6, you'll see a series of other adjustments really related to some particular equipment used for radiation detection as part of the emergency response to nuclear incidents, and some other small FTE adjustments. So to review the governor's recommendation for FY23, the governor recommends $164.2 million, including $36.4 million SGF in FY 2023. This is an increase of $9.6 million, all from special revenue funds, above the FY 2023 revised estimate. Recommendation includes 293.6 FTE positions, which is unchanged from the agency's request. So some of those specific adjustments that the governor is recommending, item 7 is inaugural expenses. Recommendation includes an increase of $25,000, all from special revenue funds for activities associated with the 2023 inauguration. These expenses are reimbursed by the inaugural committee. Item number 8 is the Joint Forces Headquarters construction. The recommendation includes a total of $17.6 million, all from Federal National Guard Bureau funds, for construction of the Joint Forces Headquarters in 2023. This is an increase of $9.6 million above the 2023 revised estimate. So the adjustment encumbers funds for the entire project in FY23 rather than expending funds over multiple years. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes FY 2023. I can proceed on to 2024 or stand for questions. Very good. Moving on to page 8, you'll see the FY 2024 analysis. And you'll see that this year, the request for that year includes more enhancement requests. The agency, looking at the bottom of page 5, agency requests $143.9 million, including $36.3 million SGF for FY 2024. This is an all funds decrease of $10.6 million, including an SGF decrease of $110,166 below the FY 2023 revised estimate. Request includes 293.6 FTE positions, which is unchanged from FY 23. Looking at the adjustments, you'll see the first adjustment is the agency requests, again, an enhancement for state disaster payments. Agency requests a total of $20.9 million, which includes $1.9 million. So in short, $1.9 million SGF can be used to leverage an additional $19 million in federal payments, specifically for severe storms and flooding that occurred in June 2017. The next enhancement request, item 2 at the bottom of page 8, is rehabilitation and repair. Agency requests $2 million, including $1 million SGF for additional routine rehabilitation and repair among 38 armories and other National Guard facilities. The agency does note that there is an agreement with the National Guard Bureau that provides a 50% match for most projects. Moving on to item 3 at the top of page 9, the agency asks an enhancement request for the State Defense Building, or SDB, remodel. Agency requests $22.6 million SGF for a complete remodeling of the State Defense Building in Topeka, which houses the Kansas Division of Emergency Management and the State Emergency Operations Center. Agency notes that the current configuration is inadequate, lacks sufficient space to support 24 hours operations, lacks technology to meet emerging threats, and lacks briefing and training space. The last enhancement request is item 4, an enhancement for the Office of Emergency Communication. The agency requests $178,000 for the Office of Emergency Communications for FY24 to offset elimination of a transfer from the State Highway Fund. Items 5 and 6 again reflect adjustments to COVID-19 federal relief and federal disaster relief payments. Item 7 relates to capital improvement. So absent the enhancement requests that we talked about earlier, which relate to rehabilitation and repair and remodel of the State Defense Building, the agency request includes a decrease of $21.9 million, including $21 million SGF in capital improvements for FY 2024. Decrease is primarily attributable to expenditures for construction of a new Hayes Armory, totaling $18.1 million, that occurs in FY 23, but is not anticipated to reoccur in FY 24. And the agency budgeted $8 million, so essentially the second year, all from federal funds for construction of a Joint Forces headquarters in Topeka. Moving down to the governor's recommendation, governor recommends $112.1 million, including $13.9 million SGF for FY 2024. Recommendation for FTE positions remains unchanged. So the adjustments that the governor is recommending, governor recommends related to item 9, recommendation for the enhancement related to rehabilitation and repair. The governor recommends partially funding that request. The recommendation includes $1 million, including $500,000 SGF for additional building maintenance for FY 2024. This is a decrease of $1 million, including $500,000 SGF, below the agency's request. Further, the recommendation splits expenditures between rehabilitation and repair and deferred maintenance. Item 10, enhancement request for the State Defense Building remodel. The governor does not recommend this enhancement for FY 2024. Item number 11, enhancement for the Office of Emergency Communications. The governor does not recommend that enhancement. The final adjustment for FY 24 is item 12, Joint Forces Headquarters construction. Recommendation includes a decrease of $8 million, all from federal NGB funds, for construction of the Joint Forces Headquarters in FY 24. That really simply reflects that all of the expenditures would be encumbered in 23, so those expenditures for half the project are not required for FY 24. If you look on page 11, that provides additional details on several of those enhancement requests. I would just draw your attention to page 12, which spells out the State Defense Building remodel a little bit more. As we discussed, the agency requested $22.6 million for a complete remodeling of that State Defense Building. It houses KDM and the State Emergency Operations Center, which is the state's primary site for coordination of disaster response. That facility was built in 1978, and the agency notes the current configuration is inadequate and lacks the following, which would include sufficient space for operations of the Emergency Operations Center, sleeping and eating amenities to support 24-hour operations, lacks technology, and some other items listed there. A remodel of the existing State Defense Building is preferred rather than constructing a new facility off-site due to the facility's location on a secure site at 2800 Southwest Topeka Boulevard. Expenditures for this, for the State Defense Building model include construction, partial demolition, and acquisition and integration of technology, as well as parking and emergency power generation accommodations. The agency did note a request for funding from the Federal American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, was submitted to the SPARK Task Force for remodel of the State Defense Building, but determination was not made on that funding as of the time of this submission. That essentially covers both of the fiscal years, and I'd be happy to stand for questions. We also have Major General Wright Weishauer here, who is the Adjutant General of Kansas, and is ready whenever you are, sir.
Merle, thank you for the presentation. Committee, we have any questions? Merle? Senator Billinger.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Merle, on page 9 on the rehab, Governor cut that in half. Do you know why that is, or do I need to wait?
I think that's the agency, when they submitted their budget request, they requested to combine funding for rehab and rehabilitation and deferred maintenance into one fund. The agency, or the governor's recommending that remain split into two funds. Deferred maintenance would primarily be larger scale projects that are planned out, known more in advance. Rehab and rehabilitation are usually more sort of maintenance-related items that may have just emerged and are lower expenditure projects.
Thank you.
Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for Merle. On that, was it the disaster building for $22 million? Is it the governor apparently said we have this Spark bid out, right? A request for the grant. Is that still in Is that still a possibility that happens, that we would get granted that money?
So that would seem to be still a possibility. The Spark Task Force did recommend that some $94 million be set aside for state modernization and efficiency projects. So these could be projects at various state agencies. They often involve sort of HVAC replacement or purchase one-time expenditures that relate to HVAC or replacing data systems. So I believe the Department of Administration is sort of administering, as this is a grant program. I think they may have put out a RFP recently. I don't know that any final determinations have been made on that funding. And the agency might be able to articulate whether they had to go submit a subsequent application for this funding.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Merle. Next presentation, we welcome Major General David Wishar to the committee. It's an honor to have you here, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Major General Weishar. I'm your Adjutant General. So I'll answer that question first. We failed to inform Merle this morning. We got an email yesterday. The Spark Committee approved that $22.2 million for the State Defense Building. So sorry, Merle. I could have saved you about 3 minutes worth of talking there. Okay. So thank you for the opportunity to stand before you to discuss the Adjutant General's Department budget request included in the Governor's budget. As you know, the Adjutant General's Department is responsible for the operations of the Kansas Army and Air National Guard, the Kansas Division of Emergency Management, Kansas Homeland Security, and administrative support for the Kansas Wing of the Civil Air Patrol. The diverse nature of the agency makes it unique in that it receives funding from both state and federal governments. As you'll see from the budget request, there are portions which are entirely state, some are entirely federal, or split between both federal and state. Some of that federal funding is not available to us without state funding. The department's request includes the items that are essential for the execution of our mission in synchronizing multi-agency assets, utilizing integrated planning, coordinating local, state, and federal resources, providing equipped, trained, and ready Army and Air Forces, rapid emergency response, and cohesive Homeland Security capability to protect life and property in our state and protect national interests from both Kansas and abroad. Your support of these items is not only critical to military readiness, but also emergency management activities that support and protect our state and nation. The Adjutant General's Department owns and operates approximately $4 billion worth of assets, including buildings, warehouses, major weapon systems such as tanks and howitzers, rotary and fixed-wing aircraft, and IT equipment. In fiscal year 2022, we received over $400 million in federal monies and around $10 million in state funds. As you can see, the allocation from the state is a relatively small portion of our overall budget. However, it is a critical piece. Again, the bulk of our funding comes from the federal government, but when it comes to state operations and facilities, much of it has to be matched by a certain percentage from the state. You'll see that reflected in the budget request and as Merle talked about, especially in our supplementals and in our enhancements. One exception to this is Civil Air Patrol. Their operating budget is 100% state funded. Our number one priority for supplementals and enhancements continues to be our deferred maintenance. We have 38 armories spread across the state of Kansas, and then 3 Air National Guard locations, Wichita, Salina, and Topeka. All total, we have about 220 buildings to maintain. So we talk about 38 armories. That doesn't equal 1 building normally. So again, large number of buildings for not a lot of money. In 2016, we conducted a statewide survey that identified and outlined a clear facility improvement plan based on current facility condition and facility functionality. The result of that study indicated that $37.6 million was needed to repair facility infrastructure and to improve facility functionality that was conducted and constructed mostly in the 1950s. We're updating that study this year to look at the progress that has been made, specifically over the last 2 years, thanks to consistent and predictable spending in this area. For 2022, we were able to award $1.9 million in state funding for construction projects that was matched with $9.1 million in federal funds. We expended an additional $600,000 in minor maintenance costs exclusive to armories across the state that was split 50-50 with the federal government. A couple of the larger projects that these funds paid for were parking lot repair in Iola and armory repairs at the Wichita South Armory. In the upcoming year, we plan to work on armory improvements in Kansas City, a new water line in Great Bend, and repair actions at a reserve center in Kansas City that we are acquiring. Our second priority is disaster funding. The open disasters in our state and projected state costs associated with these disasters is approximately $17.4 million. Most disasters are 75-25 split. And as Merle explained, federal government pays 75%, the state is responsible for 25%. We further break that down into the state is responsible for 10% and the local municipality is responsible for the other 15%. The exception is the open COVID disaster, and that was 100% federally funded. So again, the state match dollars are very critical in ensuring we receive the federal portions to pay for these disasters. In closing, I want to thank you again for funding the new Hayes Armory last year. We are looking forward to the land acquisition piece and look forward to the new 49,000 square foot facility to serve Western Kansas. Thank you for your support and consideration. I'll stand by for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Major General.
Yes, sir.
For your presentation. Committee, you got any questions?
Thank you. Thank you, General Weisheimer.
Yes, sir.
Can't tell you how much I appreciate the facility over there in Leavenworth. It's a fantastic building over there. I had no idea there's 220 buildings of maintenance. That's a lot of maintenance. You obviously have no issue with prepaying on the Joint Forces Headquarters as the governor recommended, right?
No, that's perfect. We're moving dirt today.
All right.
So things are happening out there. Appreciate your support, sir.
May we have any other questions? If not, thank you, Major
Okay.
General.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, at this time, we will close the hearings and we will open deliberations. Any discussion? Senator Bellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd make a motion we accept the governor's recs.
Got a motion by Senator Bellinger, a second by Senator Pittman. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now we will move into Kansas Sentencing Commission. Shirley Morrow from KLRD Budget Analysis. Shirley, welcome to committee again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with me from the Sentencing Commission is Scott Schultz. So you should have the budget analysis in front of you there. Again, I point out the front table has a brief overview of the entire budget. There's also a paragraph below that table that talks about what the Sentencing Commission does. One thing I will note is the Sentencing Commission administers the Substance Abuse Treatment Program, which we refer to as SB 123, and we'll talk about that some more as we go through the budget. I will also point out in the executive summary, there is a reappropriation of $2.6 million or $2.7 million, and I will talk about that when we get to the budget of fiscal year 2023. On page 3, we have the table of expenditures, and you will notice that the operations and administration of the Sentencing Commission is primarily in salary and wages and contractual services, and then the majority of their budget is in other assistance. This is where we talk about SB 123, and then we will also talk about a new RAFT program. The State General Fund at the bottom, you'll see that little blip in 2023, and that is the $2.6 million in reappropriations. So if you'll turn to page 5, I will talk about fiscal year 2023. The State General Fund reappropriation is the SB 123 drug treatment program that not all the funds were utilized in fiscal year 22, so they were moved forward into 2023. The agency requests a revised estimate of $12.8 million, including $12.6 million of State General Fund and 15 FTE positions. This is an increase of $130,000 or 1%. And this is we'll talk about here in just a minute about the treatment programs. There's a $1 adjustment to the state general fund. And then according to the agency, the SB 123 drug treatment program and the new program that was passed just 2 years ago when 2021, HB 2026, is the new Recovery from Addiction for Treatment, or RAFT program. And that's part of the added expenditures for 2023. The governor recommends a revised budget of $12.7 million, including $12.6 million state general fund. This is a decrease of $24,518 state general fund below the agency's revised estimate. And this is due to a decrease in salaries and wages. And if you will turn the page to 6, the governor's recommendation is to delete $24,518 in state general fund for the executive director salary increase, and reduce that funding is accomplished by increasing the salary and wage shrinkage rate. So in essence, in taking that money from the shrinkage rate in salaries and wages, they will hold positions open longer because that funding for those positions are being used by the salary increase for the executive director. On page 7, you'll see the changes from the actual expenditures for fiscal year 22. This is an increase of $5.6 million, or 78.2% above the 22 actual expenditures. This increase, again, is primarily in other assistance for the expenditures for SB 123 and the new RAFT program. I will note the differences between those two programs is that the new program is a diversion treatment, diverting the substance abuse persons from the judicial system before their sentence, whereas the SB 123 is a post-conviction and court-ordered diversion after sentencing. On page 8, we can look at fiscal year 2024. The agency requests $10.2 million, including $10.2 million state general funds and the 15 FTE positions. This is a decrease of $2.5 million, or 20% below the 23 revised estimate. The decrease is mainly due to that reappropriation being in 23 and not in 24. There is an enhancement request of $100,000 for software maintenance. This is, there are initial startup costs for the grant from the Council of State Government Justice Center for $276,000, but there will be subsequent vendor maintenance and licensing costs of $100,000 that would be ongoing for that software. Another enhancement request is their bill paying services. With the passage of SB 2026, the agency must fund treatment of offenders in the new diversion substance abuse treatment program that began in July of 2021. The same treatment infrastructure is used for both SB 123 and the RAFT program, and the agency needs to be able to separate those payments out between the two. And so there's an additional $145,000 being requested for ongoing life of the program to work with those vendor payments. And then the other, all other adjustments, again, is the fact that the reappropriation does not show up in 2024. The governor's recommendation is $10.2 million, including $10.2 million SGF. In essence, the governor concurs with the agency, except for the $24,518 of state general fund. that the executive director's salary will be taken by increasing the shrinkage rate. On the next page, there's a more information on the two enhancements, the 100,000 and the 145,000 for the payments. And then the performance-based budget tables for administration and their substance abuse treatment program. And I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Shirley. Committee, we have any questions for Shirley? Senator Pittman.
Thank you, and thank you for that, Shirley. Was I to understand that the executive director is the sole beneficiary of a $24,000 increase in salary?
Excuse me, could you repeat that?
Was that a $24,000 increase in salary for just the executive director?
Correct.
In 1 year?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
That's why it's the same amount in 23 and 24. That's the increase annually. Yes.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Shirley. Next, we will have the Executive Director of Kansas Sentencing Commission, Scott Schultz. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Scott Schultz, Executive Director with the Commission. I would like to introduce my finance manager who is with us today, Kim Sage. She just joined us in the fall, so none of this is her fault. I just wanted to follow up real quick on Senator Pittman's question before. As far as that amount, the executive director did not receive that particular amount. We actually had a salary survey that we did. The legislature actually approved those things. It was an agency-wide salary that was included. We were included with bids, I think KBI, several of the other ones that were outside of the broad increase that this committee approved. And at the end of the day, the governor's office did not approve all of those except for the executive director's salary. So I actually received a 5% pay increase rather than that request. The market study that had been done by the agency would have brought us up to market. It did it with everybody except for the executive director. The governor's office gave me a 5% rather than that. So just wanted to correct, make sure that we were on the same page there. As most of you know, we operate in the criminal justice space. The commission is the state statistical analysis center for the state. We receive all the data from KBI as well as DOC. And we have in our possession, in addition to what data we collect, over 4 million records that in 14 different databases that we're able to provide value to the legislature as well as the governor's office and other stakeholders with regard to criminal justice data. I know that I'm standing between you and something to put in your mouth for food. I will just say that we would ask that you recommend governor's recs on 23 and 24. We do have a bill that is currently outstanding. You'll see that in my testimony. It's 2023 House Bill 2070. Shirley talked about the Senate Bill 123 program. This is a program that we have about 88% of our budget is a pass-through to pay treatment providers to administer substance abuse treatment in your communities based upon the court ordering them into treatment for possession of controlled substances convictions. This would actually expand that with this bill to non-person felonies. And so we obviously know from the history of the program that folks are not just committing possession offenses, they're actually stealing, committing forgeries, identity theft, and that type of thing to actually to fund and fuel their addiction. So that would actually be somewhere in the neighborhood of about $592,000 to up to $1.7 million, depending on how many individuals would be eligible in the program. And we actually ran scenarios in terms of, and that's what you see in the testimony, up to $1.7 million. This would also allow us to pay for yet another, our vendor that is currently operating within the space for us. They obviously are going to charge for more offenders that are coming into the program. So we would ask that that would be, in addition to the recommendations, that maybe be tracked, perhaps at Omnibus or something of that nature to see where it's at. But I just wanted to let the committee know that, to keep that as a placeholder perhaps. So with that, I'd certainly stand for any questions that the committee has.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Committee, do we have any questions? Any questions? Okay. Thank you, Scott. You're welcome. At this time, we'll close the hearing and we will open deliberation. A motion by Senator Billinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd make a motion, we accept the governor's recs.
Okay, I have a motion by Senator Billinger that we accept the governor's recs, and we got a second by Senator Pittman. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Second. Yeah, okay. So that covers the three that we need to do now. So at this time, we'll close our committee meeting. Adjourn. Thank you.